Episode 140, The Benefits of Anxiety with Cory Hardman.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a highly trained, experienced life coach making a great impact in the lives of their clients. And together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with a coach? Here we go.
Most of us try to avoid anxiety at any cost. It's an emotion that tends to not feel the best, and our natural instinct is to run away from it. But no emotion is bad, and all have been given to us by our Heavenly Father. Coach Cory Hardman is on the podcast today talking about all the benefits we can have in our lives if we can learn to use anxiety as a tool to propel us forward to achieving our goals. Since every single one of you listening is a human, this is an emotion you deal with. So come see exactly how well you may or may not be using anxiety in your life to create good things. If you have a teen or young adult who you know could use some help with managing their anxiety, pass this podcast along to them and then encourage them to sign up to chat with Cory on how they can manage it better. Cory, along with all the coaches here on the directory, want every human to learn to use their emotions for creating the life they want. It is truly possible to have anxiety be a tool for creating greatness. This episode will show you how that's possible. Enjoy.
Well, welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, everybody. We're glad you're here with us today. I am really excited to have Coach Cory Hardman with me. Hey, Cory.
Hi, how are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you for joining me today. It's always fun to have everybody here. I don't know. It's a fun job for me that I get to have conversations with so many well-versed and educated and wise people. I'm just saying that ahead of time. It's so fun. Cory, before we get started today, can you share with us a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I married my high school sweetheart, and we live in Syracuse, Utah. We have 3 kids, so 1 teenager and 2 young adults. My 2 youngest are at home. My oldest has moved out. All 3 of my kids have anxiety to varying degrees, and even varying degrees during different times of their lives. But interesting enough, that is not why I became an anxiety coach. So I became an anxiety coach because a few years ago, I was at church talking to a young woman who had actually been struggling in her own life. But we weren't talking about her struggles. We were just kind of small talk while we were waiting for our families. And the spirit hit me so strong that I needed to become a life coach through the life coach school and work with teens and young adults who struggle with anxiety and depression. It completely took me off guard. I was not expecting it. I wasn't seeking any inspiration like that. And so I took a few weeks to decide if it was really personal revelation. And at the end of those few weeks, I could not deny that that is exactly the path that God wanted me to take. So that's exactly what I did. I went to the life coach school, got certified as a life coach, and started my own coaching business. I now mainly work with young adults who struggle with anxiety, and I help lessen it. And I work with the parents of the young adults if they live at home and the spouses if they are married. I really found this to be so beneficial because it helps them understand anxiety better, and it helps them strengthen their relationships with these young adults. I also occasionally work with teens and adults, but mostly those young adults. And one thing that I'm super excited about is I just finished an advanced certification with Leah Davidson in nervous system resilience. And now I have so many more tools to work with anxiety at a nervous system level, which is crucial because anxiety lives in the nervous system.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is going to be a great conversation today. I, first of all, think that your story, like that inspiration that seemingly popped out of nowhere, is a pretty common story that I'm finding among us as life coaches, because it was very similar to my story. It was kind of like, yeah, no, this is not anything that I want to do, but I just couldn't deny that was what my next move, quote unquote, was. So I just think it's so interesting. It was like, it's almost like Heavenly Father was like, and I've got to, like, things are getting hard. I've got to create this army of people that have some tools that can help other people create those tools and learn those tools. And that's just kind of how I choose to look at it.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So anxiety, it's such a fun topic to talk about. People that are listening are like, no, it's not fun. That's not a fun thing to talk about. But I love your twist on it here. You say that you believe that anxiety is used and can be used for our benefit. So I want to know what you mean by that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think anxiety gets a bad rap, right? We often think of it as a really negative emotion, but we forget that it's an emotion that God created intentionally. And we can actually use it for our benefit if we allow it and learn how, right? But because we view it as such a negative emotion, we typically avoid feeling it at all costs because it's uncomfortable and we don't like it. But the problem is that we end up feeling anxiety more often and worse when we ignore it and we don't give it the attention that it needs. Because a lot of people think if we allow us, like ourselves, to feel anxiety and pay attention to it, that when we feel it, something's wrong with us and that we need to be fixed. A lot of my clients come to me and they think that they're broken. They say they're broken because they think that something's wrong because they're feeling a normal emotion, but they don't understand it. I truly believe that anything God gives us is not inherently bad, and anxiety is definitely not the exception to that. I also believe that we can learn to work with it instead of against it. The key is really just finding the right balance.
Yeah, that phrase, not inherently bad, is so important for us to recognize and grab onto. I can't help but think, I know I've been experiencing some emotions lately that I haven't been able to quite pinpoint. And I work with a coach, a personal coach, on and off, and I can always tell when it's time for me to like get back there. And that was the instant that was the case for me recently. And I was working with her yesterday, and there was this emotion that it's kind of like a mixture of anxiety and judgment that comes in for me. And she says to me, sometimes those emotions that come like quick and easy for us are there because there's something below it you don't want to feel. And you're kind of scared to feel it. So let's just be safe and hang out with there for a little while. And we talked about it and we kept digging a little deeper. And all of a sudden, like the shell cracked, like there was something like this deep sorrow that was below all of it that I couldn't access because it was like I was afraid to. And so I really, like, as you say, it's something that can be used for our benefit. I think sometimes one of those benefits too is that it shows us that there's something also that's kind of lurking that maybe we could take a little deeper look at as well.
Yes, absolutely.
My sidetrack. Okay. So can you start with explaining to me, and we've kind of jumped right past this, but I think it's important for us to cover how you would define anxiety. I think many people listening are like, oh, I know what it is. Like I feel it all the time, but
Right.
let's hear how you would define it.
Yeah. So anxiety, this is the part that most people know, right? So it's when we worry about something that might happen in the future. It can be intense, excessive, and persistent. It's really based on the way that we perceive the circumstances and the possible results. And it really only happens when we care about the outcome. Typically, we think fear, anxiety, and worry as being the same thing, but it's actually three different things. Fear is an emotion and is something we are experiencing in the present moment, something that's happening right now. Anxiety is also an emotion, but it's a future-based fear. So it's something that we're worried will happen in the future. And worry is a mental behavior. So it's an action. So fear and anxiety are emotions, and worry is an action. So we can't talk about anxiety without talking about the physiological side of it, because anxiety happens in the body. When we feel anxiety, our sympathetic nervous system responds. So think your fight or flight system. This causes you to feel those physical sensations of anxiety, like a rapid heartbeat, tightness in your throat, tightness in your chest, trouble breathing. Maybe you get sweaty or this rush of energy, butterflies in your stomach. A lot of people have to go to the bathroom. Sometimes, though, it looks completely different. This is one that's a little less talked about, but it might be an oversensitivity to your environment. So people get really sensitive. They don't want to be touched. They don't want to be around loud noises. You can be sensitive to light or a lot of movement. For others, it can create a lot of anger. It's really different for everyone, but everyone who feels anxiety emotionally also feels it physically because of the way our bodies work and react.
Yeah, that is a key thing to recognize. And I'm so glad that you're bringing that nervous system aspect into this, because we forget about that. But anxiety, oftentimes, it's almost like we can't address it until we can address the nervous system side of it. And the combination of the two, being able to look at the thought patterns and behaviors combined with the nervous system is gold.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where I'm so excited to implement everything I've learned about the nervous system to be able to tackle anxiety at that nervous system level, because that I really believe has been the missing link in helping people with anxiety, because you can't think your way out of it. You can't talk your way out of it. Like, it really is based in the nervous system. And that's where we need to target to really help people.
Yeah. And, we talk a lot as life coaches on changing your perspective and looking at things a little bit differently. But with anxiety, oftentimes thinking that you should be able to just think your way out of it actually creates more anxiety and creates a little bit, harder things to deal with. And so when you recognize that and you can look at the nervous system, you really will start to have more success, if that's the word you want to use, or a more relief, I guess, from that anxiety, if that's what you're seeking. So,
And I think that's where people feel broken, is when they're like, I can't think my way out of it, or like the normal, like the model is not working because, there's something wrong with me. But really, if you think about the model, you've got your circumstance, and then you've got your nervous system, and then your thought. So the nervous system works in between the circumstance and the thought. And so it's really the state that we're in that's going to affect the way that we think. And we have to apply and include that nervous system element before we can really apply thought work, because it lives in the nervous system. So we have to go there first.
Yeah. And for those of you who are listening who may not know what she's referring to when she talks about the model, we have a podcast episode that I'm sure we can link to in the show notes here. But also, just as a quick reminder, we talk about circumstances in our life, and then we think those are the things that cause us the pain and sorrow and happiness and joy, right? But it's really our thoughts about those things that create those feelings of joy and happiness and sadness. But there is this big space between the circumstances and our thoughts. And that is like our nervous system. Those are the things that influence our thoughts. And so we have to be able to address those.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So there is a lot of talk about anxiety. It's kind of like a buzzword. I think sometimes my kids throw it around all the time. Like, it's just like, I'm cold, or I'm hot, like I'm anxious. How do we know if what we are experiencing is too much anxiety? There's got, I think there's probably we think there's a normal level of anxiety, but who knows what normal even is, right? What's too much?
Yeah. So too much anxiety really triggers our survival instincts, and it creates a lot of worry in our life. So when we live with too much anxiety, our body just remains in that constant fight or flight response. It can cause us to get stuck in life and not do anything we want to. So I've had clients who couldn't go to school, they couldn't go to church, work, go to dinner with friends, others who couldn't drive anywhere new or commit to anything, even though they really wanted to do these things. So the more anxiety a person has, and more importantly, the more they listen to it, the smaller their world gets. So what I mean by listening to it is that when anxiety is telling you that you shouldn't do something, or you shouldn't drive somewhere new, or you shouldn't go to church or go on that date because something bad might happen, and you actually listen to it and you don't do the thing that you were planning on doing, that's listening to your anxiety. But what happens is they avoid any experiences that might trigger them to feel anxiety. And by doing this, they shrink their world. They're trying to create a safe space for themselves. But the problem is that they really back themselves into a corner and they avoid living their life. And the other problem is that when you live in this constant state of anxiety, your nervous system is constantly activated and you perceive things as dangerous that really aren't. So let me give you an example. So it's really easy to misread people's facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, and misinterpret things as being threatening. So say you went to a social event, maybe with your spouse. You're driving home and they proceed to tell you how mad that one person was at them and how they know that other person hates them and everyone hates them and then they shouldn't have gone and they don't want to go back. And you cannot figure out what they're talking about because you were in the same room the whole time, included in the same conversations, but you didn't notice anything that would indicate any of those things. This type of thing happens because their perception is off and they totally misread people. They misread their tone of voice, the body language, the facial expressions. To them, though, those threats, they are their absolute truth because that was their perception and you are not going to convince them otherwise. And Heather, I think it's important that when we're talking about anxiety and too much anxiety, if you're feeling that kind of anxiety that I just mentioned, or you feel anxiety every day or anxiety for things that don't match up, it doesn't make sense that you're feeling that amount of anxiety for that activity or circumstance, you really should seek additional help, especially if it's affecting your everyday life. And the support really can look so many different ways. There's not just one size fits all. So it can be a medical professional, a psychiatrist, a therapist, a life coach. It can include medication or no medication. And really, oftentimes it's a combination of a few of these things. It's not one size fits all. So it's important that you do what is right for you and what works, no matter what that combination is. It's just important that you get the support that you need.
Mm-hmm. It is so important. It's hard to be able to say, like, turn inward, listen to your own intuition, because sometimes like that might just be off too, right? If you're overly anxious, you think you don't know if you can trust yourself to know if you need extra help. And I really actually think that even though we think we can't trust ourselves, we can trust ourselves. Like, turn inward, ask some of those questions. Like, is this something that could be different? Could I benefit from some help here? And like you said, there's so many different avenues of places to turn.
Yeah. And I think the other element of that is, if someone that you trust and that you really, that really cares about you is saying, hey, I think you need extra help. I think it's really important that we validate that and that we listen to that and that we can, really trust them and get extra support.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you mentioned you can have, well, we talked about too much anxiety. The flip side of that is too little. What does that look like? And I don't know that anybody listening is like, oh yeah, too little anxiety is not good.
Yes. It's something that we don't talk about. Like, most people have probably never heard of too little anxiety, but too little anxiety is also paralyzing. So if we didn't feel any anxiety at all, we wouldn't have a reason to strive for anything. You wouldn't want to perform well, do things on your to-do list, or get a better job. You would really just become complacent in life without any anxiety. So without enough anxiety, we wouldn't have anything to drive us to do better or to move forward in life. So I'm going to give you an example. So say you were a fireman and you worked at the fire station and you didn't have any anxiety about someone's house burning down. You probably wouldn't hurry to put out the fire. Like, you wouldn't have any reason to, any anxiety there. But if we use the same analogy and we take it back to the too much anxiety we just talked about, and you were a fireman, you might call for help and report there's a 5-alarm fire when the only thing you know is that the fire alarm went off, but you don't know if it was for real or just a low battery in the smoke detector. So we do need a little bit of anxiety, or we would just become complacent.
Yeah, so true. And can I totally side rail this conversation and say, why is it that fire alarms only start to chirp battery dead in the middle of the night? That just happened to us like 2 nights ago. And every time, why does that happen? Anyway, sorry, that was
absolutely. I wondered the same thing.
Totally taking us off track there. But Yeah, thinking about too little anxiety, we need it. We have to have some there. And it isn't anything that we need to fear. We just get to learn how to work with it instead of against it.
Yes.
Where does that balance come in that you mentioned earlier? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the right balance is really going to be in between the too much and the too little that we talked about. When we can find that balance, it provides us enough drive to propel us forward without causing shutdown on either too much or too little. Anxiety in the right amount can become a positive and productive energy, so it can help us perform better. So think about if you're giving a speech, performing on stage, presenting to a class, or even playing sports. Like it can help us plan and prepare for the future. And anxiety can be used as a means for us to move between a problem we have and our solution. It propels us into action and it can help us change and better ourselves. And this is really where I believe that anxiety can be used for our benefit and how God intended for us to use it for our good.
Ooh, as you said that, I kind of imagined this continuum of like a problem on one end and a solution on the other. And like from point A to point B, there is anxiety in between there. And we kind of just get to have this sliding scale of figuring out how does it best serve me? And if it's like not helping me solve this solution, if it's keeping me frozen, like kind of this takes us back to you might need a little bit of help. But if it's keeping you from doing, if you're not like anxious to do any of it because you just don't care, then that's a little like that's keeping you like frozen too in a way, right? Like they're both keeping us from accomplishing what we want. So yes, it's that sliding scale of figuring out where we want to be. So how then do we use anxiety to help us?
Yeah, well, first of all, we really need to get good at feeling our feelings. And part of that is being uncomfortable. And our mortal experience is really to experience it all. So we need to feel and experience every emotion on this earth as well, not just seek after the ones that we want to feel because they feel good and avoid the ones that we don't want to feel because they're uncomfortable. Because God really created all of our emotions for a reason. They all serve a purpose. And I believe that discomfort is really the path to growth. So we need to get really good at being uncomfortable. When we can do this, and really get good at feeling all of our emotions, I really believe we can live a fuller, more expansive life. And I think that this is where we can really accept, help, and lift other people better, is when we can feel our own emotions without pushing them away. And there are a few other ways that I have. So one way that anxiety can help us is when we're feeling it, we actually are way more reward focused. So we have higher levels of dopamine when we feel anxiety, and it can help us move towards a positive outcome. So it can motivate us to do things like study harder for a test or devote more time for a presentation or a class in school. And it helps us put more effort into relationships or things that are important to us. It helps us pursue things that are important that we want to do in life. And this is why we can feel anxiety when we're excited about something. So if we're excited about meeting someone new that we want to meet, or if we want a job and we're going for that job interview we really want, we can perform on stage better after practicing for months, or doing something for the first time that we're excited about. That's where that positive energy and positive anxiety can come in. But on the opposite side, we can't talk about the dopamine from anxiety without talking about the opposite side of it. So we really need to be careful how we manage our anxiety, because we do have the higher level of dopamine, so we can easily send the wrong message to our brain. So if we use negative outlets to manage our anxiety, our brain will associate the negative outlet with the dopamine that we got from the anxiety. And then we will think that is the best way to manage it. So let me give you an example. So,
Okay, good. I was sitting here thinking, give me an example of the negative.
yes.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, a lot of people go to chocolate. So we're going to use chocolate. So if you eat chocolate when you feel anxiety, you are telling your brain the best way to manage your anxiety when you feel it is to eat chocolate. But Chocolate by itself gives you a dopamine hit. So you're doubling up on the dopamine when you do that. A lot of our outlets actually create more anxiety. So, caffeine, chocolate can create anxiety in people, even, substances that some people turn to. So it can create more anxiety. But our brain has associated that negative thing with the dopamine from the anxiety that we initially got from the anxiety. So the cycle just continues. So it's really important to learn to manage our anxiety in healthy ways because we already have the dopamine from the anxiety. So it can help us or it can hurt us depending on what we do and how we manage that anxiety. And then one last thing that I want to talk about when we're talking about anxiety and how to use it as our benefit is we can actually use it as an assessment tool. So we only feel anxiety about things that we care about. So if we aren't feeling anxiety at all about something, we need to really decide if it's important to us. So for example, if we didn't want to get the job that we were interviewing for, we probably wouldn't feel nervous about going to the interview. Or if we had no intention of going on a second date with someone, we probably wouldn't worry about how the first date went. So we can use anxiety to help us determine what we want to eliminate from our lives, what's important to us, and we can also use it to help us determine what we want to give more attention and time to.
Ooh, I love the idea of using it as an assessment tool. I'm sitting here trying to think of different things in my life that maybe I'm not feeling anxiety around. I can spend some time thinking about that today.
Right?
So many great points there, and a lot of things that I hadn't really taken into consideration before. I find it really fascinating. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. As we start wrapping this up, Cory, I am wanting you to be able to share with people where they can find more of you. Would you mind sharing that?
Absolutely. So I am on Facebook and Instagram at Cory Hardman Coaching, or you could go to my website and it's coryhardmancoaching.com. Cory is spelled Cory. And I also created a free resource for all of you listening to this podcast. And you can get that by going to my website. And it's coryhardmancoaching.com/anxiety for that free resource.
Awesome. Thank you. I am so looking forward to checking that out. And thank you to our listeners for being with us today. I know you listening all know people who struggle with this topic, and whether it's yourself or somebody you love. So please share this and let's just kind of spread the love and help everybody around us find the relief that they're looking for and learn how to use anxiety to their benefit. Thank you so much, Cory.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been great. All right, everyone, have a great day. We'll see you next time. Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.